I want you to get together.
And they literally thought themselves to be gods, building statues dedicated
Yeah,
to themselves, and acting like new gods. And maybe there was this, but this is what this means that these are not Millennial Kingdom buildings then, but they may have been around during the Millennial Kingdom, perhaps repurposed for
that's what I think.
for
And
his
there's a
for
lot of
his ring.
archaeology where they say they're built on top of old structures.
Hmm.
You hear that a lot too, where it's like these older structures underneath, and then they got these nice, beautiful things above them.
Hmm.
And that could be like what you're saying, right? Where you had these some beautiful stone structures in the past, and then when that's destroyed, you have the Catholic Church or the Christians building these beautiful churches on top of them,
Or
or
maybe some of them
renovating
survived.
them.
Yeah, maybe some of them survived. Why waste something when it's you could use that for people to live in, for
Yeah,
example. There's no need to demolish it and start from scratch if it's still standing. But tribulation would have been terrible. Earthquakes all over the place, famines,
yeah,
plagues, and it would have destroyed a good portion of that global empire. It would have been a reset, you could call it. And some of these buildings did
yes,
did end up buried, some of them, and didn't. And obviously, I think you could argue when the burying happened. Was it before or after the little season began? Or the millennial reign began? There's still
yeah,
timeline issues we need to hash out here, but perhaps these cathedrals are Roman buildings, and perhaps
yeah. I
Jesus
think it's possible.
perhaps Jesus in his millennial reign, because he came and conquered. I don't think it was all peace and happiness as soon as Jesus turned up. I think from what we can see,
No,
and
I think it came like they said, right, with fire and the
yeah,
sword.
I think there was wars. There were wars for this, for to gain and
Yes,
establish control, and I think there was still rebellion even during his reign. Okay, I mean, there would have been people who got defeated by Jesus who lived through his reign. You know what I mean? Like empires and
yeah.
civilizations, and not all of them would have been just on board. And I think someone described it. I think Noel was the one saying this. Maybe it was. Or someone else may have said it. But it's basically saying it's still the human story of rebellion. Even I think the point is. Even when Jesus Christ, God Himself, is on earth physically ruling, man will still rebel. Even when Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden with God right there next to
Yes.
them, they still disobeyed Him and rebelled. I think that's the point that Millennial Kingdom proves. It's like, even when I'm here, you still reject me. Do you know what I mean? Even when I'm right in front of you
Yeah.
and there's no shadow
Eh,
of a doubt. And I think the Millennial Kingdom did have that issue. And I think, obviously, when the Millennial Kingdom ended and Satan was given his little season, there was plenty of people around who were willing to work with Satan immediately, who didn't
Yeah, I
like.
think these powerful families that were probably came from these righteous bloodlines of Charlemagne and like these that were probably these righteous families that were given authority to rule
Mhm.
as Christians.
Yeah.
And then when this season happened, when the devil was let loose, these people that we now call the Illuminati or these Illuminati families, um, I think are the remnants of of actually the righteous people a while ago.
Yeah, well, I think people are saying here, and I get this a lot. It's like, oh no, the kingdom was a spiritual thing. It was not a physical thing on Earth. It says no, he came to rule with a rod of iron. That's a pretty hard metal.
Yeah.
It's a physical object. I think they're trying to make it. I think he made it clear. I am coming in a physical form, but my kingdom
Yeah.
is not of this world, but I'm going to make it of this world and show you what can happen if I rule this world. But at the end of the day, that wasn't the end goal. The end goal is final white throne judgment and a new heaven and earth. Okay, so people are
Yes.
upset. I think people still hold a lot of weight to the millennial reign. They think that was the most important thing to ever happen, and everything was riding
Yeah.
on that event, and it wasn't. No, no, that was just like a taste of what could be. It was showing, and again, I think it was a test. It was basically showing people, here I am, I'm in the flesh. You can come to my floating crystal city. You can make the pilgrimage, which it says people should do during his reign. Make
I
the.
think it said that if you didn't, your nation would lose all its power.
Yes,
So they probably had to go.
it would have no it would have no rain. It says you would have a
Yeah.
drought.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, and I don't think it was necessarily that Jesus was traveling the earth, ruling each city. He left the people to make the choice. I'm here. You can all see me. Nobody can miss me. All compasses are pointing towards me. Come now, make the pilgrimage. Every eye has witnessed me and seen me. It's clear now I'm real. Okay, this is basically what happened, and some nations didn't go. they still remained in rebellion. And I think the whole, it says the kingdom of God is within. A lot of New Agers like to use that phrase, don't they? And say it's all spiritual and within and inside. There is no such thing as a physical kingdom of God. It's all within you. And I think no, that doesn't mean there isn't going to be a physical. I think people grossly misunderstand that phrase. And from what I've come to
Great.
understand it to be is, look, I think it even says this as well. You can't enter his kingdom if you aren't on his side. You could make the pilgrimage, but if your heart's not in it, you will not enter into his kingdom in a physical sense on earth when he was reigning for 1,000 years. Like I think that's the point. I think it's kind of the unrighteous cannot enter my kingdom. Even in a physical sense. I think there
Hmm.
was those who they could make the pilgrimage, but if they didn't actually want to see him or love him or want him to be their god, you still couldn't get through that barrier through the gate. You would not have been allowed to go into the kingdom, to the beloved city with the saints. You still couldn't have made it because you didn't have the kingdom within you either. Do you get what I mean? I think that's what he was trying to
Yeah.
say. Like, you have to have it in your hearts that Jesus Christ is Lord of Lords. He is your King. And you want to,
Yeah.
you love him and you want him to be your God. If you don't have that in you, then you don't have the kingdom within you. You will not enter into his kingdom, spiritual or physical. You're not allowed.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's what he was trying to say. It was twofold, and
I agree. There's spiritual and the physical. I mean, before, while we're here and we have this physical world, I mean, we all here, we all see it, right? Uh, Um, but like you said, to me, it's clear that all of history, like to me, one of my favorite ones to talk about is the Vikings. I'm sure you and your audience will like this.
sure.
So you got with them, and there's literally a stone. I found it recently. The archaeologists have it. It's for Harold Bluetooth, which is literally like the symbol, like the company Bluetooth is from Sweden. They took the symbol.
Yeah.
It's an actual symbol of Harold Bluetooth, who was this Viking. He's the Viking who then, basically conquers Sweden and Denmark and these places and makes them Christian. So he's like the beginning of Christianity for them. And when that happens, you could even see it in their names, man. It hit me once with Leif Erikson, the famous Leif Erikson. And when I found out that his dad was Eric the Red, and that's when I was like, that had to be the moment again, where like Christianity was now taking over. Like the world now is about these Christian kingdoms. And they had to, now they were even given like last names. Nobody even had a last name before then. So like you have the famous Eric the Red. That was his name, Eric the Red,
Hmm.
right? Probably because he had a red beard or whatever, and his name was Eric, and that was his nickname. No last name. So then his son Leaf turns Christian, right? So what's his last name? Eric's son. That's why you see that in so many names, right? Jacob's son, and this, and you see son in so many things. The Russians, I think it's the OV you see at the end, like Romanov. Is that what son of the Romans?
Hmm.
Uh, so uh,
I can quickly interject there with a little
yeah.
anecdote about my second name. My second name is Stobbs, Stobbs, and it actually goes back to the Doomsday Book, so around 1066 period. Okay, so let's remove 1,000 years. Let's say
Uh-huh.
that's 66 when the takeover's happening. Let's say, or 70 AD or something. um,
Uh-huh.
it
Yeah.
it's when second names were being introduced is where my name can go back to, this book where everyone began to have a second name. And
Yeah.
my actual second name, Stobbs, is a variation of Stib, which is Stybb. It's an old English word which means tree stump.
Huh.
And the reason that they called people Stibbs, it was actually a taunt against the Viking invaders of England at the time because they were short and stocky like tree stumps. So these settlers who settled in England from the north, from Northumbria down, from Norway, they settled in like Leeds area, Newcastle area, the north of England, but not quite Scotland. And the locals made fun of them and said, "Look at these short people over here," and they called them Stibbs to kind of take the piss. But that's stuck as a second name because that's what the nicknames were, and it's kind
Uh-huh.
of and that's where I come from. That's where my lineage comes from, and I'm still in the north of England, and we never really left, and that's where you'll find the Stobbs predominantly, and the source of it all. There's actually a lay in the middle of northern England. There's a streak or a road called Stobbs Lane, which is right in the heart of Yorkshire, Pontefract in Leeds, which is where they say they all settled. So it's still there. The history's there, but with this new perspective, it's just interesting that that probably wasn't 1066. That was actually probably 70 AD. That was
Yep.
when
The same time.
with the same
Yep.
time when everything was being Christianized, and it goes in with
Yep.
this Viking mythos you were talking about. But carry on. Sorry, I interrupted. But go ahead.
No, no, you're carrying on. I mean, that's what I mean, man. And then I found like whether it was Chinese culture, same thing. You know, we look at their names and we're like, I don't know what that means. You know what I mean? But it literally means like Christopher or Joseph.
Hmm.
I mean, all the nations turned Christian. And oh, this is a good time so I don't forget Tartaria.
Yeah.
Um, So we all love talking about Tartaria. I want to add a lot into that too. I was someone in the beginning, pushing that and getting that to be a big topic. But then, like right away again, I feel like there was certain things that people were putting out there that wasn't accurate. One of them was like right away, everybody was like, every structure is Tartarian, and like they were this world empire,
Hmm.
and that's not true. Like, there's nothing about Tartaria where they were a world empire.
Hmm.
They were the biggest empire when they were around, um, but they're basically pre-Russia.
Hmm.
And what they go back to is the Golden Horde of Genghis Khan and this and that, and the Khans. And the Tartarians were a Christian empire. Like we're talking about, all these nations were Christian. And to me, Flamenco and them, here it is. Like, I feel like you probably feel the same being from England. Uh, Correct me if I'm wrong, but here in America, like, I feel like we don't know a lot about China and Russia, and like, everything's about like Europe mostly. Uh, but Russia is huge, and they're a big part of history. And talk about Millennial Kingdom. What's the first city? St. Petersburg.
Hmm.
I mean, was that for St. Peter? You know what I mean? Was the first church there for St. Peter? Um, we're told that they were the Orthodox, right? The
Yeah.
Russians were Orthodox. So here it is. Flamenco and them are Russian, so I take their research pretty serious, and they do get into Tartaria stuff. And to them, the Tartarians were ended in 1775, and that's when I started thinking, like, okay, so is this like when America, it had nothing to do with like, English citizens rebelling against the English Empire and fighting for freedom, that this was, the takeover of Russian Tartarian Empire that got crushed and erased from history. Rome basically takes over and they create this new Russian history with the Romanovs and these people.
Mm.
Um, but they weren't like an encompassing the whole world. They were just the biggest nation 250 years ago that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
But to me, I'm going with Flamenco and them, and I believe their research is pretty accurate. And they're saying that they were the original like Golden Horde. They were part of the Genghis Khan, that Golden Horde, um, which when you look into, they were Christian. Genghis Khan was dealing with the Pope, talking about God, and setting up all these laws that were pretty righteous under Christianity. Um, I think that's what they're covering up, man. I mean, even the image they show us of Genghis Khan. I mean, when the books they talk about him being a redhead. I mean, but they show us this like I don't know what you call like a black-haired Mongolian looking character, right?
Kind of like a
Like,
mix between like a samurai and horseback, but with like
yeah, but
longer
that's not
hair
even
and
the
yeah.
real. Yeah, it's not even the real image and the real story. They're hiding the Millennial Kingdom. That's what it definitely seems like. The
Yeah.
other thing I think about too is we all know that they're destroying all these buildings, right? Since the 1800s, right? With all these world fires and,
Hmm.
they're constantly taking stuff down.
wars, World War. I mean, World War One was
Yeah, bombing
rife.
these things right off the bat.
All the empires were
Uh,
involved in World War One, which we considered Tartarian. All the European empires, all the Russian empires were involved. The monarchy of the Russia ended after World War One, and then communism
yep.
took over. Which again is a highly disgusting belief system rooted in Gnosticism.
Yep.
There was a whole the Bolshevist revolution as well. But even during all of this chaos and power grabs for kingdoms and empires, which seemed to happen during this early 20th century, so much was destroyed. Like,
Yeah. And
so much was destroyed.
I've done a lot of time and research on the Jesuits and worked with, friends with Eric Phelps, who wrote Vatican Assassins, Johnny Cerrucci, and other Jesuit experts. And, it's clear that the Jesuits, since the 1800s, have been causing all these wars and doing this stuff. They clearly created the Bolshevik Revolution and communism and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This is all recent creations from these demons in charge.
Absolutely.
But they were all Christian at one point. That's for sure.
Well, yeah. It seems like there was this period we call it the Middle Ages where everyone was just Christian as hell. Like it was just
Yeah,
it
everything was
dominated
about
everything. Yeah,
it.
they just could not stop talking about it. It was just in every artwork. It was everywhere. Not like I said, not just Europe. It seemed to
Yeah.
span quite a distance. And again, I agree with what you're saying, and a lot of what Fomenko shows is that a lot of history was made up, but not like made up. Copy pasted is a good word for it.
Yes.
It's kind of
Yeah.
like what was happening over here in one region of the earth happened in an identical fashion in this region of the earth on the other side, but the dates are separated by 600 years, but it's talking about the exact
Yep.
same event, but just
Yeah.
just with different names and different characters, but everything else is identical. And it's what Fomenko says about a lot of these events is the chronology is all over the place. This is one event that happened here
Yep.
with one group of people, and it basically ends up shortening our time span drastically, doesn't he? Once he starts putting these events together, and I guess there's a lot of it
Yeah.
has to be guesswork about when the real date happened, but that's what all chronology is at the end of the day. It's trying to make it the best we can with the evidence we've got to try and put a timeline together in
Yeah.
some way. And like you said, what was the name of the predominant timeline we follow today? It's Scala. What was it? How did you say?
Scalegarian. Yeah.
Scalegarian. Yeah, and
Yeah. Joseph Scaliger.
people say he
Uh,
was a Jesuit, but wasn't he a Calvinist as well, or something like that? I've heard that as well. Um,
he could have been. Yeah.
yeah, well,
There were a lot of Calvinists then.
there was a lot of stuff going on. Was it around the Reformation? Was it around that time when all this got
I
made?
think he was a little bit before that. I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah, because
He's early 1500s, I think.
right. Yeah, a lot of stuff was going on around that time period.
But then I started thinking, like, even the names. Get this one. Maybe you and your audience never heard, but we're told, like, these beautiful buildings, right, and stuff that they painted, which is beautiful. There's no doubt about it. But we're told, like, Michelangelo, and I'm like, the name itself, is that like Michael the Angel? Like, again, was the angels actually built this stuff, and they're just like, oh yeah, Michelangelo, and that's like a play on Michael the Angel.
Hmm.
One of the most beautiful temples out in France. It's like, the Cathedral of Saint Michael or something like that. They're saying that the saints built them.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm starting to believe that they did.
Are you talking about Mont Saint Michael there just off the northern
Yes,
coast of France? Yeah, that thing looks incredible.
it
Like,
is beautiful, and they're
absolutely
saying that
incredible.
the angels built it.
I want you to get together